Hey guys, what's going on? My name's Daniel and welcome to my channel where I teach people just like you how to do more things for and by yourself. And in today's video, I'm going to be making 1 gallon of Apple Melomel. Apple season is finally here and apple cider is on the shelves at all of my favorite farmers markets, so I can't pass up the opportunity to make 1 gallon of Apple Melomel. This is a super simple recipe, an easy to follow along process with minimal equipment, so let's roll on into the video. But before we do, I just want to remind you that if you're having a good time here, if you think this content is valuable, go ahead and hit that like button. And if you want to follow this fermentation journey and see what other awesome videos I put out in the future, then go ahead and hit that subscribe button so that you can see my face more often. Also, if you're new to homebrewing, if you're kind of intimidated and don't know what to start, I have some useful links down in the description below, including a 1 gallon Homebrew Ohio winemaking kit, which pretty much has everything that you actually need to start making your own ciders, melomels, wines at home. Now that that's all out of the way, let's start making our 1 gallon of Apple Melomel. So throughout this video, I'm going to be going over the recipe for our Apple Melomel. I'm going to be talking about what equipment that you need, and then the process that this will all go through. So let's go ahead and start with the recipe. For this recipe, I'm only using 3 ingredients. 1 gallon of apple cider. I recommend using the freshest, highest quality apple cider because the starting ingredients that you use will determine the finished product of your Melomel. Whenever you're picking an apple cider, check the ingredients and make sure that there's no preservatives. That will put your fermentation to a halt and you will not go anywhere. Preservatives look like potassium sulfate or potassium metabisulfite. They're usually referred to as eights or ites, so make sure you read that ingredients label. The second ingredient is going to be 1 pound of honey. You can use 1.5 or 2 pounds of honey if you truly like, but I'm going to go ahead and use 1 pound of honey today. The third ingredient that is going to be the star of the show is Red Star Premier Classic wine yeast. I'm going to be using a 1/4 teaspoon of this great, amazing stuff. This will be fermenting all the sugars in my Melomel into alcohol and releasing CO2 as it does it. The equipment that we're using in this video, I have a 1 gallon Glass Carboy, I have my 1/4 teaspoon measuring device, I have a funnel which makes my life a lot easier, and then I have a little container that I'm going to be starting my yeast in. I also have a lid for my 1 gallon carboy for shaking, and then I will also be using a hydrometer and a graduated cylinder, and also an airlock that is going to allow the gases to escape during fermentation, but keep any bad stuff out. So that's all the ingredients we're going to be using. That's all the equipment we're using. Now let's go into the process. So step number 1, whenever you're starting a homebrew, is to sanitize all your equipment. I use San Sanitizer to sanitize everything. So now that everything is sanitized, we can start adding our ingredients. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start waking up my yeast while I do everything else. So I'm going to add a 1/4 teaspoon of this Red Star Premier Classic wine yeast into this cider that I've already poured out in front of me, and allow that to kind of wake up while I'm putting my ingredients together. What you'll notice is that the wine yeast will sink down to the bottom and then it'll start to bloom as time goes on. Now the very first thing I'm going to add is my 1 pound of honey. You don't have to use a pound, but the amount of honey that you add is going to determine the overall alcohol content and the sweetness of your Melomel. So how did I choose 1 pound of honey? Well, it all has to do with the specific gravity that I want to get to. I know that this cider has a specific gravity of about 1.046, and Google told me that for every 1 pound of honey that you add to a gallon of fluid, it adds about 35 gravity points. So if I add 35 gravity points to 1.046, that's going to get me to about 1.079. So 1.079 will get me to right above 10% alcohol content. For me, 11 or 12% is a sweet spot, but I think 1 pound of honey getting me to right above 10% is perfect for me. And so I'm going to go ahead and add 1 pound of honey. Now, if you wanted to figure out what adding more honey would do, you would just have to use the rule that for every pound of honey, you add 35 gravity points, and that'll tell you what your specific gravity should be around. I honestly don't recommend using any more than 1.5 pounds of honey for this specific recipe. So now that I made you guys do some math, let's go ahead and add this stuff. Well, my footage completely cut out in the middle of making this, but all you missed is that I put all the honey inside of here, and then I put some cider inside the jar of honey, and then I shook it up and then poured it into here to make sure that I got every last drop of honey. And then I have been adding cider to this and giving it a good vigorous shake. Slowly adding more so that I can mix all the honey in with the cider. Okay, so it seems like we've added as much cider as we can. There's a lot of foaming at the top and I don't want it to bubble over. So now we're gonna use our hydrometer and our graduated cylinder to take a specific gravity. Now, making sure that your honey is completely dissolved is super important. Otherwise, you're not gonna get an accurate reading. My estimate was 1.079, so let's see how close I am. So my hydrometer is saying I'm right around 1.074, which is 5 gravity points off from what I guessed. You know, I wish I could think of some random thing to blame, but maybe my math was just off, who knows. But I'm still gonna be right under 10% ABV, which I'm perfectly fine with. As I said, you can feel free to use 1.5 pounds of honey. You can feel free to use 2 pounds of honey, but I really don't think it's in your best interest to go above 1.5 pounds of honey. That'll give you probably right around the 12% sweet spot for your Apple Melomel. So let's go ahead and add this back. So while the foam possibly dies down for a second there, what I've done so far, and you might have missed a second of it because my footage cutting out, but I took the pound of honey, added it to the gallon carboy, and then I put some cider in here, shook it up, poured it in here, tried to get every last drop of honey. Then I added my cider incrementally, vigorously shook it, tried to dissolve as much honey as I possibly could, and then I took my specific gravity reading, which is going to tell me that I'm going to end up around right under 10% ABV. Now that that's all said and done, I have to try to add this yeast that has been blooming the entire time on top of all this foam. So wish me luck. Let's go ahead and do this. Well, there you have it. I have never had a harder time adding yeast to my must in my entire life, but it's in there, and now I have to go ahead and grab an airlock and throw it on. So I have my airlock, throw it on there. All the ingredients are mixed together. The airlock is on, and so that is all that we have to do today. Even though the ingredients were simple and so was the process, I still somehow managed to make this a giant pain in the butt. And now that I overfilled this, I have to pay attention to the airlock to make sure that as the yeast is all activated and active, that it doesn't go into my bubbler, which I've had happen before. It's not the biggest deal in the world. It just means that I have to take this off, clean everything up, and put the airlock back on after everything is sanitized once again. So it's just a pain in the butt. This is why you need to make sure, I should have known that putting this volume in with a gallon of cider would definitely be greater than 1 gallon. Shame on me, but I learned my lesson. This is going to sit and ferment. I'm going to check the specific gravity every couple of weeks. What I'm looking for is a specific gravity to go from 1.074 down to about 1.000. Whenever it's around 1.000 and the bubbles are done coming out of this bubbler, then that's when I know that it is done fermenting. I'll continue to rack this from this carboy to another clean carboy every few weeks because a yeast cake is going to develop on the bottom, and racking it over will allow it to clear and allow everything to settle. Once fermentation is done and everything has settled and cleared, then it's time to bottle. With my honey wines, meads, melomels, I generally allow them to ferment and settle for longer than usual. So this is definitely going to be a 3 to 6 month process of just fermenting and clearing. But that's it. This is our 1 gallon of Apple Melomel. All the ingredients are in here. The process is super simple. I hope that I've explained it adequately. That is all I have for you today. If you're enjoying apple season, if you're making some apple wines, some ciders, some melomels, please let me know what you're doing down in the description below. I can't wait to see what awesome, amazing thing I'm going to make or do next. I already know what it is, but you don't, and that's why you have to subscribe and stay tuned for my future videos. But until then, I hope you guys have an awesome time learning to do things for and by yourself. I'll see you next time.